Cool, so hello everyone, welcome to our presentation today. My name's Shaan Mistry, and we're going to run through our journey to create a modern and great analytic culture. So before I kind of get started, for my personal self, I'm a product manager here at Alteryx. I've worked as a solution engineer as well in the last 4 years, and this is just some of my take on, I suppose, what it really takes to create a great culture. So there's 4 kind of key areas that I think of, kind of analytic maturity, digital transformation, analytic talent, and also a simplification of technology that you're using. Before we really go into this, from my side, when I think about creating a great culture, when I think about going on a journey, I might think of it as scaling a mountain. There are certain questions that we want to kind of think of in order to do this. I suppose one side of this is that what's the actual objective? The objective is to get to the top and again, hopefully come down safely as well. But some of the factors that we have to consider. Now again, these could be real questions that we need to be asking. So what training do we need to actually get there? What are some of the provisions that we need to cater for, such as food and water? What about the equipment that we need? What about the technology in order to get us there? But what about the route, and also the weather, and also the team's welfare? So again, some of the questions that we must ask ourselves in order to go on this type of journey. Now again, as with most journeys, when we try and embark on something like this, things do happen, things do change. What happens then? Do we kind of adjust? Do we stay put? Or do we then decide to actually, let's just turn back now and let's just admire the view from where we are? So I suppose the first thing I want to discuss is more around kind of analytic maturity. So again, every organization, I believe, should be asking this question kind of more often than not. So again, where are we in terms of our analytic maturity? On the kind of first stage, you might have people that are kind of organizations that are kind of deem themselves to be analytically impaired. Again, they're not really concerned about analytics in any way, shape or form. I think that most organizations are probably on this second tier, where they actually have very, very small pockets of analytics in the organization, but they're using it for very basic reporting analysis. The other side of this is more kind of organizations that are looking to have more analytic aspirations. So maybe there's kind of a wider adoption of analytics, they can see the value in it, but it's not that widespread across the business. So again, you've still got kind of these siloed pockets. Where you have more companies that are more kind of analytical based companies, that they see the real value and they're actually starting to actually develop and build a culture. Now they're very good at analytics, but the real kind of players here are those that have kind of, as we say, reached analytic nirvana. These are companies such as your Facebooks, the Yahoo, the Google of the world, where everything that they do is relating to analytics. Every decision they make, analytics is at the forefront. The other side of this is more around, I suppose, digital transformation. I was having a look at the S&P 500 and having a look at the tenure of some of the companies that were listed on there. In the 60s, the tenure there was around 30 years. By the 90s, this has dropped down to 20. And then in the next 10 years, the tenure of some of these companies are going to be down to maybe 14 years. Now, I suppose as the kind of customer base changes, maybe the products that you're selling, the services that you're offering, a lot of this needs to adapt to the environment changes as well. So again, being able to change and actually transform is going to be key to actually move forward. Now, when we think about kind of transformation, there's probably a real kind of tension around this. Now, companies might fall into kind of 2 sides of this. There could be innovation transformation, whereby your business models are staying exactly where they are, but the way in which you're working is changing. So maybe you've developed new ways to do things, whereby they'd be faster, whereby they might be smarter, or maybe you offer a product in a new color. The other side of this is disruptive transformation, whereby you actually rip and change the whole business model to maybe generate new revenue. Now, I would say that there's no real kind of right or wrong kind of way to do this. It's more about knowing where you are in this, which will help steer your journey or what type of path you're going to follow in order to actually do some type of transformation. Now, when companies say that they've undertaken digital transformation, or when they say that they're seen as being kind of digital, I suppose some people only think of it as technology. Technology ultimately is not going to change a business process. It's the way in which you can change the way you're working. Ultimately, it's still going to be stemming from the data itself. It's the data that exists within your organization that's going to help change the decisions that you're making. So again, as companies look to kind of be seen as kind of digital or digitally transforming, it's more about the way in which we can really harness the data, which is actually going to drive the decisions, and that's the change really that we're after. When we look at some of the kind of transformations that take place, there might be kind of three main areas. And again, everyone that's attending the conference today has probably been thrown a whole bunch of kind of acronyms and buzzwords at this. I've kind of broken it down into three areas where we've got kind of RPA or robot process automation, or just simply process automation. We've got descriptive analytics, maybe more BI based, and then we also have more around predictive analytics or optimization and modeling, which is more kind of where AI fits into it. When we think about some of these transformations, what is it really giving us? So from a RPA or process automation standpoint, this is more about the way in which we were working with our data. Traditionally, you might have somebody carrying out tasks in a very manual, very repetitive way, going kind of over and over that same process. The RPA side of this is maybe more automation to help kind of deliver the ROI in a much more quicker, more efficient and repeatable way. If we think about it then for the next stage and doing more descriptive analytics, this is more about then using that data to tell the story. Based on the story that the data is telling, it's going to actually help you make more of an informed decision. But we're still using the data and the steps we've learned from the RPA stage of the transformation in our day-to-day in order to get there. The final stage might be more around more predictive or prescriptive analytics. Now, I've picked out a few of the top scenarios that people want to do within their organizations. The problem here is, or not so much a problem, is that most people don't really have the skills to do it. So they're still stuck in those first two stages. And when we think about that type of analytic transformation, it's this stuff that's going to actually yield the greatest ROI. So again, we want to do it, but we might not be able to. It just might be that transformation step might just be a little bit out of reach. Now, I suppose this is really where it comes down to the analytic talent itself. When we think about kind of analytic talent, are we really giving people the ability to access all of the data available to them? Are they able to discover everything that exists within their world? So maybe it's within their department, whether it's in their organization, and do they actually know what others have actually been doing? Now, some of this stems from the top. As a business, are we creating a kind of clear strategy to this? If we think about kind of the cultures that exist in our organization, who's really driving it? Is it messaging from the top? Is it coming from the bottom? Or is it just growing organically? Some would say it's a little bit of both. Are we also giving people a platform to work with that is going to help them do their job in the fewest amount of steps? And the other side of this is it really encouraging critical thinking? Do we actually want our kind of analytic talent within the organization? Do we actually want them to be curious? Do we want them to actually ask questions? Or do we want them to just get on with it? So I suppose if we have a look at the talent that exists right now, A lot of the users are broken down into three main categories, where there might be business users, more advanced business users, and then your data scientists. So at the moment, your kind of business users and advanced users are probably still using a lot of spreadsheets. Maybe some of them are having more kind of SQL-based skills. And then we have our data scientists that are maybe using their own kind of coding methods. And this has been the kind of standard for many, many years now. As we look to shift to the future, a lot of those maybe users that we might deem to be advanced are actually going to start becoming, as kind of Gartner keep coining it, citizen data scientists. I suppose some of the technology and the way they're working day to day is going to change as well. So whereas before that they were still using or calling analytics being done in Excel, maybe there'll be more kind of abstract platforms available to them. So again, some of the analysis that they're doing is actually coming from the platforms themselves. The data scientists are still going to carry on as they are. They might increase, but I suppose it's more that middle area where we're going to see the biggest change. Now, there are a few, I suppose, cultural implications of doing this. If you start adopting kind of new platforms and new technology that are only code-free, you're actually alienating a lot of the users. Data scientists are going to feel that they're being targeted. So again, they might put their barriers up and then feel that they're going to be, losing power, losing control, and the areas of expertise that they provide are going to be devalued. If you then switch things and go to maybe a code-only approach, the problem is you alienate absolutely everyone else. So I suppose really you want to find this kind of middle area of being able to operate in a more code-free and code-friendly way. That way you give everybody a seat at the table, and that should in turn build a better culture in the organization as a whole. Now, we were looking at some of the research. We've got some by kind of Krinsky and Hetrick. This is actually something that resonated quite well. If we think about kind of a few years ago, the way in which people were working, it was very siloed, even within the same teams. If you were a typical data worker, you might be kind of working very much on an individual basis. You might have your own rogue data sources on maybe your machine. And when you go away on holiday, you're like, well, actually, I'll do it before I go, or I'll do it when I come back. And this very much kind of covering up, putting your arms over your work, because only you want to be able to do it. I suppose if we start adopting some of these newer practices, we can actually start building more harmony across the teams. So again, being able to share the insights more, being able to actually open up and say, hey, I have this really great data asset here. I think it's going to be great for everyone else in the team to use. Why don't we all use that same source? That way we're all focusing our attentions and actually using and gaining the same type of quality insights. Again, this should be adopted, I suppose, across teams as well, not just within single departments. If we think kind of in terms of analytic skills as well, we have certain different kind of personality types. You might have some personality types which are more, I suppose, based on kind of compassion. We've got some which are more kind of results driven. But then what about the actions themselves? Some of these could be face-to-face interactions. The other side of the equation is that it could be more math or machine learning based. And what about the outcomes? Do you really want things like intuition and gut feel to be the decision drivers in the organization? Or do you really want kind of to focus in on kind of the machine learning and algorithm side? So I suppose if we think about this within our kind of teams and the way in which we work, if we go too much to the kind of far soft side of things, we kind of start adopting a culture of kind of hit or miss. It's not going to work every time because it might end up being, well, I believe this, let me put my finger in the air. However, if we start doing things the opposite way and move to the hard side of doing this, it's very unsustainable, and it's going to become very costly as well. So probably on that far hard side, there's only few companies that can afford to do this day in, day out. So again, things like the Yahoos, Googles, and so on. Now, a lot of this is going to come down to technology. Now, technology is all around us. From a business perspective, We use technology to find as much as we can, but some of the problems exist, and there's 4 kind of areas where there might be certain elements of chaos within most organizations. It could be around the data. A large amount of data is actually hidden from the actual data workers. It's there, but they can't really access it. Now, this data could be in the form of many different formats. So again, most kind of the real analysis that we want to do might be coming from 3 to 5 different sources of information. Once we've tried to, I suppose, get that data, we're still doing it over and over and over again. We haven't really mastered the craft of automating what we do. So again, there's a whole host of kind of inefficiencies there where we actually are burning hours by doing this. And then if we think about our kind of more advanced users, our data scientists, a lot of what they create is great. However, not much of it really fully makes it into production. So if you think about the kind of more analysts or data workers that want to consume those insights and actually consume the outputs of these models, they never fully get that real production-ready model in practice. So if we have a look at kind of a typical setup where we've got kind of data in one area, we've got our data workers, and then we maybe have a data science and an IT team. The biggest challenge here is the barriers that exist. None of these teams really collaborate and share information on a daily basis. A lot of them don't even use the same technologies because they've all got very different skills and they've all got very different needs as well. When we think about a typical analytics supply chain, this is broken down into a very kind of disconnected or fragmented culture. On one side, you've got maybe, let's say, IT, who have got access to the data. They've got access to, I suppose, the initial cleaning steps. And then you've also got some elements of their own kind of version of ETL. Once they've done their work, they blindly might throw it over the wall and give it to another team. So maybe you've got another team that want to enrich the data. So maybe in this case, there might be GIS specialists. The problem here is they're using their own bit of tooling and their own bit of software. They've done their bit, they now throw it over the wall again and give it to the data scientists. They then sit there and code in whatever preferred language they have. They then throw it over the wall to IT or DevOps, and they might say, right, let's productionize this. But the skills that they have or the languages that they've used aren't transferable. The business are then there waiting for that information. But again, this is where we've started to get this kind of patchwork quilt of, I suppose, analytics and analytic practices. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking, what are the real needs? So again, I'm coining this as Mistry's Venn of Needs. But if we focus on kind of like data workers first of all, the data workers want to, and actually they don't want to, they need to access data. So for them, connectivity to data in an easy way is kind of key for their day-to-day. The next side for them is all about automation. They want to productionize the work that they're doing so they can move on to maybe other projects. And a key thing here is collaboration. If they don't share the work that they're doing, they're creating even silos within their same team. So again, if we have a more kind of collaborative culture within the team, within the department, within the business, this is going to be better for the culture. If we think about the data scientists, they still need access to the data and the automation. But for them, it's all about productionizing what they've built. If they can't put it into production, all their time, all their effort is wasted. And then we have IT. I know that, I suppose, when we do a lot of these talks, IT tends to get a bad rep. Ultimately, they are creating a secure environment for the whole organization. Ultimately, they do not want another data breach. They don't want to be that company in the news saying, oh, a lot of their information has been leaked. So ultimately, IT's job here is to create a safe, secure environment that is going to meet the needs for the business going forwards. So again, if we think about this, what other barriers could be in place? Now, when we think about a technology stack, sometimes businesses adopt a technology stack because they got a best price. They'll be like, well, let's just adopt this technology because we got a really good rate and it's within budget. The problem here is that it might even be a recommendation from a friend of someone on that same level. By going down that particular route, which means that you might adopt a technology that has a very difficult language to operate, maybe it's kind of, code heavy, which means that we're alienating users. What about the skill to use it? Is there a very steep learning curve in order to operate this? If we start experiencing these things or these blockers that put people off, we then start alienating other parts of the business as well. So I suppose as we look to move away from this disconnected culture, we really want to start moving to this more self-service. So again, being able to work with a single, I suppose, platform that works with other platforms at the same time without creating that bottleneck. So again, if we think about a typical analyst, they might have their data that they're trying to actually find. So being able to search on the data that exists, themselves, because they can visually see what they want to do with the data, they can actually get it into the right shape and format. From there, the enrichment can happen seamlessly without having to leave that particular platform. And then we can leverage the models that the data scientists are actually creating. And as we start to automate this and scale across the business, ultimately it's going to create better insights for all. So I suppose that's my real take on, the journey. In order to build this great culture, we need to do a few things. We need to make sure that we empower the analysts, give them the tools and the required that meet their skills. As we look to create, more citizen data scientists, are we actually allowing them that time to actually ask those difficult questions? Are we allowing them a platform to be curious? As we look to move across and create this more harmonized approach, we then want to actually bridge the actual gap itself. So bridge the gap between your data science team and the actual value that the business is trying to actually solve. And ultimately, it's going to come down to breaking the actual barriers across the teams, the individuals, and the departments themselves, but also the data. If we actually create a more harmonized view, again, the only way this is going to really happen is by actually having a more centralized platform in order to do that. And my final message on this is don't let fear dictate the journey. Ultimately, if you don't look to change, if you don't look to take the first step, you're never really going to get that view from the top and look out and actually see what a great culture you've actually built. So for that, I want to thank you for listening today. We do have some time for us to go through a bit of a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask away. Otherwise, you can come visit us at booth 527, which is just around the corner. Thank you.